In this module, let's talk about the income elasticity of demand. The income elasticity of demand is the percent change in the quantity of a good demanded with a percent change in income. As a formula, it looks like this. So this epsilon q comma I is delta q over q, which is the percent change in quantity, divided by delta I over I, which is the percent change in income. It can be rewritten in a kind of useful way as delta q over delta I times I over q, where again I is the income, q is the quantity of the good. What we're asking with this concept is when income rises by a percent, by how many percent do purchases of the good rise? We can use the income elasticity of demand to classify goods into different categories. One category of goods we call inferior goods have income elasticities of demand that are actually negative. Normal goods have income elasticities of demand that are greater than or equal to 0, and a subset of the normals are the luxury goods that have an income elasticity of demand greater than 1. Let's focus on this idea of an income elasticity of 1. What that means is that expenditure grows by the same percentage as income. So, thought experiment. Suppose that when income rises by X percent, that expenditure also rises by X percent. What would that look like? So we have two pictures here. On the left-hand side, we have a picture with income on the horizontal axis and the amount of expenditure on the vertical axis. And what we see is that this is a straight line coming out of the origin. So when income goes from 100 to 200, expenditure on the good in question goes from 10 to 20. In the right-hand picture, we see the income on the x-axis and the share of expenditure on this good on the y-axis. And we see that it's just constant at 10% regardless of income. That's what it means to have an income elasticity of demand of exactly 1. Turns out this is a useful cutoff, at least for thinking about different kinds of goods. Continuing this thought, we can see that the income elasticity of demand is related to the expenditure share. Remember, the expenditure share is price times the quantity divided by income. And it, in intuitive terms, is the share of expenditure devoted to some particular good. This table summarizes these different kinds of goods and the relationships between income and the amount and the share of expenditure. So, for example, suppose that as income rises, the amount spent on the good rises, but the share of expenditure on the good falls. Then we have a normal good. If the amount spent rises as income rises, but the share is constant, as in the pictures on the previous slide, then we have an income elasticity equal to 1. If the amount spent as income rises rises, and the share of expenditure on the good also rises as income rises, then we have a luxury, and we have an income elasticity of demand of greater than 1. Finally, if the amount spent on the good falls as income rises, then of course it'll also be true that the share of expenditure on the good falls when income rises, and that's an inferior good with a negative income elasticity of demand. It's kind of fun and rather interesting to go look at some data, and we can use data on income and expenditures to classify categories of goods. There's a very interesting data set that the Bureau of Labor Statistics collects frequently. It's called the Consumer Expenditure Survey. And what that data set has in it is the amounts of money that households at different income levels spend on many different categories of goods. Here's what one of the tables looks like. It's a little hard to see, but it's just meant to convey that, wow, there's lots of detail here, and you can see, for example, the amount of money that households, say, with income less than $5,000 spend on housing and shelter and gas and many other things. But let's zoom in on a couple of categories. Let's think about housing. It's kind of a broad category, so we can think about housing and we can represent the amount of spending from the Consumer Expenditure Survey, the amount of spending on housing across households of different income level. And we can see that this rises steadily. The amount spent on housing rises pretty steadily as household income is higher. And so it's going to be a normal good. We can also see that the percent of income allocated to housing across households of different income levels falls for households with higher income levels. So this is a category that it's a normal good, it's not a luxury, and the income elasticity of demand for this good is between 0 and 1. There's another category in the Consumer Expenditure Survey called entertainment fees and admissions. Now it's going to turn out that these are luxury goods. How do we know that? Well, in the left-hand picture, we see that households with higher income spend a higher amount of their income on entertainment fees and admissions. That by itself doesn't tell us whether it's a luxury. It could be normal. But on the right-hand side, we see that households with higher income level devote a higher share of their income to these fees and admissions. So that's what shows us that it's a luxury good. It has an elasticity of demand greater than 1. And just to be a little careful about that, that's the income elasticity of demand that we're talking about in this module. Finally, let's look at tobacco products. The left-hand picture, we see that at low levels of income, increases of income are associated with increases in spending on tobacco. But once household income passes about $50,000, as households with even higher income spend a lower absolute amount of their income on tobacco products. So that tells you that for household income above about $50,000, tobacco looks like an inferior good. Now, it's no surprise then that the share of income spent on tobacco products is falling for most of the range. We can also use this idea of inferior goods and normal goods, just the taxonomy of types of goods, to think about demand for particular firms' products. There's evidence in research showing that Walmart's revenue falls during good times, whereas Target's revenue rises during good times. In fact, the specific estimates of the income elasticity of demand reveal an income elasticity of demand around 0.8 for Target, making it a normal good, and around minus 0.5 for goods sold at Walmart, making Walmart's products inferior goods in the taxonomy of our theory. Takeaways. So the income elasticity of demand is the percent change in the quantity of a good demanded with a percent change in income. Or as a formula, it's this epsilon, Q comma I, equals delta Q over delta I times I over Q. When epsilon's less than 0, the good's inferior. When epsilon's greater than 0, the good's normal. And in particular, if epsilon's greater than 1, then the good is a luxury.